video is probably one of those videos which could change how you see the chart, whether you're a beginner or an intermediate trader. And if you could master and easily identify what I'm about to show you, you'll make so much money from trading forex. If you're really serious about learning this, then please do not brush through this video. Make sure you watch this video to the very end, because I really can't believe I'm teaching these things on YouTube for free. So without wasting my time, let's get straight into the video. So in today's video, we'll be looking at trend lines, and we'll be talking about what a trend line is, how do we draw trend lines, how do we trade a bounce of a trend line, and how do we trade a retest and a break of a trend line. Now, I know most of you may be wondering, do we really need trend lines when we know about market structure, support and resistance, and candlestick patterns? Well, I think you need to know about trend lines because sometimes market tends to react very well on trend lines instead of the conventional support and resistance that we usually draw on our charts. So knowing how to trade and draw trend lines becomes an additional confluence for your trading entries and confirmations. So it's always best to know how to draw your trend lines and your support and resistance levels. So now let's get into trying to understand everything concerning trend lines. So to make trend lines very simple for you to understand, it's simply a line which shows you a pattern or a trend in the charts. Now these lines can be drawn from the top to the bottom or from the bottom to the top, and the essence of drawing these lines is to help us identify the trend in the market, whether market is in an uptrend or market is in a downtrend. So we can say drawing trend lines makes it very easy to identify an uptrend market or a downtrend market. So it's simply connecting one point of a trend to another by simply using a line to connect these 2 points, either from the top to the bottom or from the bottom to the top. Now let's get into the chart and let me show you how this looks like. Okay guys, like I mentioned, a trend line is simply a line which shows you the pattern or a trend in the market, and this can be an uptrend market or a downtrend market. Now like I mentioned, these lines can be drawn from the top to the bottom or from the bottom to the top. Now let's get into the chart and let me show you how to draw these trend lines in an uptrend or a downtrend market. Okay, so we have our uptrend market right here, and you remember I mentioned that in an uptrend market, what we can use to depict an uptrend market is a series of higher highs and higher lows, higher highs and higher lows, higher highs, higher lows, and higher high right here. Now one thing I want you to keep in mind is that the major points here, the higher highs and higher lows, higher highs, higher lows points here, are also known as swing points. We call it the swing points. And these are points where immediately you look at it, there's always an immediate reaction or a major reaction from that zone. Like when we look at a higher high right here, this higher high here, we can see there's a major selling reaction from this zone where this market came all the way down here. When we look at this higher low right here, there was a major buying reaction from this zone all the way up here. Now the major points up here are known as the swing highs, and the major points down here are also known as the swing low points. So keep in mind, we have the swing highs here and then we have the swing lows here. Now keep in mind that the swing highs and then the swing lows are always major points in the market where there's always an immediate move or a major move. So you can see from this point we have a major move, a selling move all the way down. From this swing low point we have a major move all the way up. So now I hope you understand what the swing highs and the swing low points are in an uptrend market. I hope you understand. So to draw a trend line in the market, you always have to make sure that your trend line is touching at least 2 of the major swing points, meaning it can be a swing high or a swing low, which in this case in an uptrend market we are going to be drawing it on our swing low points, meaning that when we take our trend line tool, we have to touch at least 2 of the major swing low points to make our trend line a valid trend line. If it doesn't touch at least 2 points, that trend line is invalid. So let me show you how to draw the trend line on the chart. Now if you want to draw the trend line on the chart, you come to this tab right here. So you see all the tools on the left here, you come to the second one, this right here, and then you click the arrow here, which is going to give you a drop down menu. Now you see lines up here, and the first tool on the lines tab is the trend line tool. So you select the trend line tool. Now you remember I mentioned that the trend line tool can be drawn from the bottom to the top or from the top to the bottom. I hope you understand. So in this case, since we are talking about an uptrend market, we will draw from the bottom to the top. Okay, now keep in mind that we have 2 types of trend lines. We have the ascending trend line and we have a descending trend line. Now basically when we say something is ascending, it simply means something that is rising from the bottom to the top, and when we say something is descending, it simply means something that is coming from the top to the bottom. I hope that makes sense. So in an uptrend market, you're going to be using what we call the ascending trend line, and keep in mind it has to touch at least 2 of the major swing points. So now we'll start with this point right here where I'm shaking the cursor at. Yes, so we'll put our trend line tool there. Immediately we tap on the screen, the tool you selected will just draw automatically. So I'll select my trend line tool again, and then I'll start from my first point here. Now let's see if I can touch at least one of the swing points in the market. So now let's see if we can touch the bottom of this swing low point here. So now we have 2 touches on our trend line right here, at this point here and then at this point right here. Now I mentioned that having at least 2 touches on the trend line makes the trend line valid. So the more touches on the trend line, the stronger the trend line is. I hope that makes sense. Okay, so let's extend this trend line to see how many points we can touch. So we have a first touch, we have a second touch here. Let's see if if we can get a third touch on the trend line. So we have a third touch on this trend line right here, giving us a stronger trend line, because I said the more the touches on the trend line, the stronger the trend line becomes. So you realize that whenever market comes up here and then comes back to the trend line, there's always a push up. Same thing, if this market comes back and it touches the trend line right here, there's always a push up. Now let's see what happens at the next touch if we're able to touch the next swing low. So let's extend our trend line to see if we can touch all the major points in the market. So our next swing low point also touches right here, giving us a stronger trend line. So immediately I can tell that whenever market touches this ascending trend line, there's always a push up. When market touches this ascending trend line, there's always a push up. Same here, when market touches here, there's always a push up. So immediately I can tell that this market is in an uptrend based on this trend line, and also this trend line is acting as a support trend line for me, because like I mentioned, the support point is always a point in the market where whenever market gets there, there's always a push up or there's always a buying opportunity in the market. So same thing, this trend line is also acting as a trend line support or a support level. We can call it the trend line support in the market. I hope that makes sense. So this is a trend line support in the market. Okay, so same thing for the downtrend market. In the downtrend market, remember I mentioned we have series of lower highs and lower lows, lower highs and lower lows, lower highs and lower lows. So immediately we can tell this market is in a downtrend market. Now remember I mentioned that there are always swing points in the market, which is always the inception of a major move. So when we get to this lower high right here, we can see a major move all the way to the downside. When we get to this lower low right here, we can see a major move all the way to the upside. When we get to this lower high here, we can see a major move all the way to the downside. So immediately these zones become our swing point zones, the lower highs and lower lows. Just like in the uptrend market where I mentioned we have the swing point at the higher highs and higher lows, in the downtrend market we have the swing point at the lower highs and lower lows. I hope that makes sense. Okay, so the trend line we use in the downtrend market is called the descending trend line, which comes from the top to the bottom. You can see the trend line right here. For the uptrend market, it was from the bottom to the top, which is the ascending trend line, but in the downtrend market is from the top to the bottom. I hope that makes sense, because this in the downtrend is coming down and an uptrend is going up. Okay, so as we've established that, let's go ahead and draw our trend line in a downtrend market. Now keep in mind that I said the trend line has to have at least 2 touches to make the trend line valid. So we'll take our trend line tool right here and then we'll start from this lower high point here. So we'll target our first lower high point and then see where in the market that this trend line can have the next touch at any of the swing points or the swing high points. So let's extend it. Okay, we have a second touch here which makes this trend line valid now. Now meaning that whenever market touches this trend line again, there should be a possible reaction on the trend line, where when market gets to the trend line, there will always be another move to the downside. So let's extend this trend line and see if we can have a third touch on the trend line. Okay, so we have a third touch on the trend line right here, making this trend line strong and then valid. I hope you understand. Okay, so now that you know how to draw the trend line in a downtrend market and an uptrend market, let's move to the real chart and let me show you how you can draw these trend lines on the real chart. So we'll take our trend line tool right here and then we'll start from this lower high point here. So we'll target our first lower high point and then see where in the market that this trend line can have the next touch at any of the swing points or the swing high points. So let's extend it. Okay, we have a second touch here which makes this trend line valid now. Now meaning that whenever market touches this trend line again, there should be a possible reaction on the trend line, where when market gets to the trend line, there will always be another move to the downside. So let's extend this trend line and see if we can have a third touch on the trend line. Okay, so we have a third touch on the trend line right here, making this trend line strong and then valid. I hope you understand. Okay, so now that you know how to draw the trend line in a downtrend market and an uptrend market, let's move to the real chart and let me show you how you can draw these trend lines on the real chart. Okay guys, so before you draw your trend line or you draw any level in the market, make sure you zoomed in your chart to see everything on your chart clearly. Okay, so immediately I can tell this market right here is in an uptrend because we have series of higher highs and higher lows, higher highs and higher lows, higher highs and higher lows, higher highs and higher lows right here. Now one thing about drawing trend lines is that people like to take it from the bodies of the candles, but I like to take it from the wick of the candles. So I'm going to take my trend line tool right here, and then now I've been able to identify that market's in an uptrend right here. I'm going to start from my swing low point here, which is this point here. The next thing I'm going to do is to find my next touch on this trend line at the next swing low point or the next higher low point. So I have a second touch here, making this trend line a valid trend line. And notice I took it from the wick of the candles. I didn't take it from the bodies of the candles. And the next thing I'm going to do is that I'm going to extend this trend line so that whenever market comes back to touch this trend line, I'm going to enter for a very good buying opportunity in the market. So I'm going to extend this trend line to see if market will give me a third touch on the trend line. Make sure that your trend line is touching the wicks accurately. So now we have a third touch on our trend line, which is this level right here. We have a first touch here. We have a second touch right here. Let me clone this. Okay, we have a second touch right here. And we have a third touch on this trend line right here. So we can see that the more touches on the trend line, the stronger the trend line becomes. Okay, so what do we see at the third touch of this trend line? We can see that when market touch this trend line right here, we can see market giving us another major bullish move in the market, showing that this trend line is also acting as a support level for us, because whenever market gets there, there's a buying opportunity or there's a push up in the market. Now, when market touches your trend line, you can also use your candlestick confirmations to find confirmations for entries. So when this market touches this trend line right here, we can see this big bullish engulfing candle which has consumed all the candles right here, giving us a confirmation for a buying opportunity in this market. I hope that makes sense. So we have a first touch, we have a second touch, we have a third touch on the trend line. So now keep in mind that whenever market touches a trend line for the third time, there's a principle that the third touch always gives a significant major move in the market, a possible significant move. So now whenever you draw your trend line and you have two touches on your trend line right here, be expectant of a possible major move on the third touch of the trend line, because there's a principle that the third touch always gives a major move in the market, a possible major move in the market. So the third touch is always like a golden touch in the market where there could be a possible significant move in the market. So I hope you understand how to draw a trend line on the real chart in an uptrend market. Always make sure that you are targeting your major swing low points, have two touches on the trend line, and always be expectant of a possible major move on the third touch on the trend line, which is also called the golden touch of a trend line. I hope that makes sense. So now let's move to a downtrend market and let me show you how to draw the descending trend line in a downtrend market. So whenever you want to draw your trend line in an uptrend or a downtrend market, always make sure that you're able to identify the proper trend in the market, where market is giving you either series of lower highs and lower lows or series of higher highs and higher lows. So in this downtrend market, you're going to be looking for series of lower highs and lower lows. So now let's see if we can establish this market right here as a downtrend market. We have a lower high right here, we have a lower low here, we have lower high, we have lower low, we have lower high, we have lower low, we have lower high, we have lower low, and all the way down here. Now, if you want to draw your trend line, make sure that you are targeting the major swing high point in a downtrend market. So as we've established this market right here as a downtrend market, let's see how many major swing high points in the market that our trend line can touch. So I have my first touch here at this swing high point, and then this swing high point right here. And I'm going to extend this trend line to see if we will have a possible third touch on this trend line. Make sure that you are drawing your trend line accurately to have the major touches in the market. So after extending my trend line, I can see a third touch right here. So now we can see we have a first touch at this swing high point right here. Let me clone this. We have a second touch at this swing high point right here. Then we have a third touch at this swing high point right here also. Now what do we see at the third touch? We realize that when market touched this, there was a push down. When market touched this trend line, there was a push down all the way down here. Now when market touched this, we can see another push down here. So we can tell that this trend line is acting as a resistance level for us in the market, where when market touches there or price gets there, there's always a push down. When price touches this trend line, there's always a push down. So we can call this descending trend line right here a resistance trend line, meaning that whenever market touches this trend line, there's always a resistance to push price down further. So we can see when market touches this trend line again, there's always a push down. So there's one thing that I want you to take note of. Whenever you're drawing your trend line and your trend line is not touching one of the major swing points in the market, you don't have to force the trend line to touch it. I hope you understand. So let's take this trend line to, then let's start right from this level. So we are starting from this swing high point here. Let's see if we can have a second touch in the market. So now we have a second touch on this trend line right here. Now let's extend and see if we can touch this swing point right here. Now when we extend the trend line, we realize that this price is not touching the trend line right here. So you don't have to force the trend line to come here by all means. If it's not touching it, it's not touching it. Now just know that when market is not touching it, you don't have to force the trend line to come and then touch this market by all means. If you do that, it means you are also disregarding this point right here. So make sure that whichever point you started from, you're extending the trend line accordingly. Now let's extend this trend line and see if we can touch this level right here. Now when we extend our trend line, we realize that market has given us a third possible touch. So if you are trading trend lines and then you don't have market touching your trend line again, that doesn't mean that you have to rush after market and then sell this market just because market is selling. Wait for another touch on your trend line, because that's a strategy that you are trading. Once market touches this trend line for the third time, there's going to be a possible move for you in the market to also sell. Now keep in mind that whenever you are trading a particular strategy in the market, always stick to what the strategy tells you. If you support and resistance you are trading, wait for market to get into your support before you buy. If you are trading trend lines, wait for the touch on the trend line before you sell. Just like this point right here, market didn't touch this trend line, but there are people who always rush after the market just because market almost touched it but then started selling before them. Always wait for your strategy to play out for you. This market will definitely come back to your zone, and then you can react or you can sell with the market from there. If you're always rushing after the market, you may possibly catch a falling knife, and this will hurt you or wound your account miserably. I hope that makes sense. So now that we understand how to draw the trend line in a downtrend market and an uptrend market on the real chart, I'll move ahead and then show you how to trade the break and the retest of a trend line. So just as in support and resistance, you have the principle of the break and retest. Same thing in trend lines, you can also have the break and the retest of a trend line, where when an ascending trend line breaks, it becomes a new resistance point for a selling opportunity in the market, or when a resistant trend line breaks or a descending trend line breaks, it becomes a new reversal point for buying opportunity in the market. So let me show you how you can use the break and retest on the trend line to trade as a strategy on its own. Okay, so when you have your ascending trend line right here, okay, we expect that whenever market touches this trend line, there's always a bounce up. Market touches this trend line, there's a bounce up. Market touches this trend line, there's a bounce up. But then there are possible scenarios where market will break this trend line. So let's assume market comes all the way up here and then it's coming back to this trend line. Ideally, we'll be expecting another push up, right? But then we have market breaking through this trend line, and immediately market breaks through this trend line, it makes this trend line invalid. Now once market breaks through this trend line, the next thing you're going to do is to wait for a retest of this trend line. Now once market breaks through this trend line in the market, immediately this trend line becomes a resistance trend line for selling opportunities in the market. I hope that makes sense. So this becomes a resistance trend line for selling opportunities to come into the market. So the break of this trend line causes this trend line right here to become a new resistance zone for selling opportunities in the market, meaning whenever market comes back and touches this trend line right here for a retest, we are going to enter for a selling opportunity in the market, a possible selling opportunity. So whenever market comes back to retest this broken trend line, which has become our new resistance level, we can enter for a possible selling opportunity in the market at this trend line right here, where you can use your candlestick confirmations, whether you see a tweezer top here, you see an evening star, or you see any candlestick confirmation which gives you a bearish confirmation in the market to enter for sales. So we see market comes all the way down here, and we may possibly have new series of lower highs and lower low forming in the market. I hope that makes sense. So in a downtrend market, we'll be expecting that when we draw our trend line and market touches all the valid points on our swing high points, okay, and we extend this trend line right here, we'll be expecting that when market comes back to retest this trend line, there'll be a possible selling opportunity in the market again, right? But sometimes market doesn't go this way. You have markets breaking through the trend line right here, and immediately market breaks through this trend line, becomes a new support trend line or a new support level in the market for a retest. So you can wait for a retest on this trend line right here and then buy the market. I hope you understand. Now sometimes just because market has broken the trend line, you have people jumping in for buys at this point, running after the market. But trust me, the safest way to trade this is to wait for a trend line break and retest and then enter for another buying opportunity in the market from this level, which is a safe level to buy from. I hope that makes sense. So now I believe you understand what trend lines are, how do we use trend lines in the market, how do we trade the bounce of a trend line, and how do we trade the break and the retest of a trend line. I hope that makes sense. So that'll be all for today, guys. If you enjoyed this video, do want to smash that subscribe button right below, and also like this video so YouTube can recommend it to a lot of people who want to learn about forex trading. Now you all know the enormous information and value I share in my videos, and I want this video to reach a lot of people who want to learn about forex trading. So if you are new here, do want to hit that subscribe button and help us reach 1,000 subscribers very soon, so many people can learn from the value and the information that I share in these videos. Also, do want to follow me on Telegram and on TikTok at AbaTrades, and do want to join my Telegram community at AbaTrades community, where I drop trade signals and setups on a day-to-day basis for people to make money for free. Also, a reminder on my mentorship program, which is beginning this Saturday. I'm so excited to raise 10 people who will become crazy forex traders and who understand the chart just like I do. So if you are interested in this opportunity, do want to send me a message at AbaTrades on Instagram or on Telegram, and I'll be willing to respond to you. Now do want to take advantage of this opportunity because it's going to change how you approach the chart and how you understand the chart. It's going to make the chart very simple for you to understand, and it's going to make you a profitable trader overall. Do want to check the details on the flyer and then send me a message at AbaTrades on Instagram or on Telegram if you're interested. That's all for today, guys. It's AbaTrades right here, and peace out.